You're live, Jen.
Oh, thanks, Catherine. Thank you. Hi, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's SME Club meetup. For those of you who've not met me before, I'm Jen Quinn, Growth Manager at Virgin Money Manchester, and we are delighted to be sponsors of today's event. Like many of you at the moment, we're working from home, but it's lovely to still be able to connect and deliver events to support our local business communities. Our key focus at the moment is to ensure that our customers are supported. Information on the support offered can be found on our website, and we'll be sharing that link with you all following today's event. Please do feel free to get in touch with me or any of the team if there's anything else that we can help you with. We'd love, of course, to hear how you found today's event, so please do tag us in your social media posts. We are at Virgin Money on all social platforms. And finally, today's discussion topic is the knowledge exchange with sports industry experts. Kat of Growling Communications will be chairing today's panel. So for now, I'll hand over to Kat and look forward to catching up with you all at our next event.
Thank you so much for that intro, Jen, and thank you all for tuning in to another knowledge exchange. We're incredibly lucky to have been able to cover a really broad range of topics in this series, and I'm really delighted today to be able to bring together such an illustrious panel of sports experts to talk about a subject which is very passionate to me and on a personal level, but I think for all of us, you know, the lack of sports in our lives right now is a really big gaping hole. Whether that be for the nation, you know, often when we're in tough times, we use sport as a way of coming together and celebrating and bringing everybody together. And it has been strange during a time of national crisis not to have sport as that outlet. I know obviously people on a personal level have been missing, you know, their gyms, that just being able to get out and about and meet kind of the other people they work out with. But I think for all of us, you know, that level of not having the summer of sport that we were expecting ahead of us, from, you know, Wimbledon, the Euros, the Olympic Games, the Tour de France, the cricket teams that you follow, we really see a kind of a big hole in kind of our lives and schedule. And that's before we even get into the economic impact of sports not being in our everyday lives. So we're incredibly lucky to have brought together a panel of real industry experts. And I don't use that term lightly because we've got a really great panel of speakers for you to hear from today. So I'm delighted to be able to welcome John Dustin, the CEO of the Rugby League World Cup 2021, who has had not the and difficult task of trying to keep a world tournament on track for next year, a year when John probably was delighted at the thought that it was quite a quiet year in the sporting world's calendar. That is no more. Kate Miller, the comms director of ECB. So again, facing challenges from every level of the game about how they, you know, adapt and change and kind of keep people kind of focused on the sports and fans engaged. Yvonne Harrison, who brings a slightly different perspective onto today's discussion. Yvonne has spent many years working for bodies across Greater Manchester, ensuring that sport is a fundamental part of kind of communities and grassroots. But she's been working for a very different class of the last few years, working for the class of 92 as managing director of Project 92 across their education and sports agenda, including UA 92 and as chair of Foundation 92. And as ever with these webinars, in times when we're trying to, you know, host things virtually, we're having a little bit of a technical issue with our fourth speaker, who is Adrian Bevington, who spent 17 years at the FA, first off as Group Comms Director for England and finally as Club England Managing Director. Adrian, for any of those who know him, definitely has a lot to say on the topic, so I'm hoping that he is able to join us in due course. But that's not to say I have three speakers who have amazing points of view, and I know they'll be really happy to share their knowledge and experience. So the majority of discussion, I really want to focus on kind of the path forward, but I think it'd be remiss of us if we didn't take the opportunity, first off, to kind of talk about the last couple of months and what that has meant for your sport and sport in general, as we've tried to navigate the real unknown. I try not to say unprecedented too much in this discussion. So I wanted to come to you first, John, because as I mentioned, you've had the perhaps unenviable task of trying to keep a world tournament on track in really unprecedented waters. So what for you has the response of the last couple of months been for rugby league, but obviously also for you in terms of organising a world-class tournament?
Thanks, Kat. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I mean, two slightly different strands to this. From a sporting perspective, it's been well documented that the Rugby League, the Rugby Football League, have received an emergency loan from government, and that was, I think, really predicated on immediacy, real genuine need from the clubs in particular, but also the social impact work that the sport has done in local communities, and that definitely resonates with some of the work that we've done over the last 5 years in the lead up to our tournament. So we as the Rugby League World Cup are in a slightly different place to many other people, still more than 500 days to go. Like everyone else, everyone's searching for certainty. Everyone's got lots of questions, and some of the things we just simply can't answer, and we're learning as we go. There is no manual, there is no plan of how this has been managed before, but for us, we've adopted a number of different principles: being calm, making rational decisions, being agile, responsive, supportive, and most importantly, staying positive. We still want to deliver the biggest and best ever Rugby League World Cup, and we think we've got an awful lot to offer, so we've just got to work through this situation, and of course we'll have to cut our cloth accordingly and change some of our plans.
Great. I'd like to hand then to Kate. In terms of the world of cricket, how do you think you've responded over the last couple of months?
Yeah, I think unusually for comms or specific to my role, we've lent quite heavily in the not knowing. I think it was really, we did a few things really. We've taken it step by step because we're conscious that this is, you know, a global event that's moving faster than any of us could possibly have anticipated. We've gone from, you know, pushing back the season a month ago to now, you know, fully planning behind closed doors broadcast activation involving international teams. So, you know, had we made those decisions earlier on and felt under pressure from other sports who were cancelling and moving forward quite quickly, I think our landscape could have looked quite different. I'd echo John's thoughts around transparency, and I think that's been more important than ever before to be transparent. You know, and try and confirm as much as you can, or whatever you can. You know, in a world of uncertainty, people are looking for certainty, and we've been quite clear to not fuel conjecture, to confirm what we can, certainly from a comms perspective, and just take it step by step. And that seems to have paid dividends so far. We're, you know, on the flip side as well, to other sports, football were coming towards the end of their season. Rugby union, of course, similarly. Cricket was right at the beginning of ours, so the ramifications for our season were felt quite keenly from an early stage. You'll have seen numbers like 380 million banded around. That's worst case scenario on the hit on the industry. In an ecosystem where we support from top to bottom, from England teams right down to grassroots, that's obviously unprecedented, to use your phrase. Set of circumstances that not in any way, shape or form would you have on any risk register anywhere. So it's planning for the unknown, taking it step by step, being transparent and open, and trying to give certainty wherever it's possible, I think has been our approach. And I'm sure we'll continue to do that moving forward, and being comfortable saying we don't know, we just don't know yet. I think it's been really important lesson for us to have learned. And I sit with a squad of people who are ex-competitive sports people who love getting things over the line and love getting things done. So getting everyone comfortable with not being able to do that's been critical.
And I think, yeah, you make a very good point there, Kate, about, I think for a lot of us, especially if you work on the comms side of the business, actually facing the unknown and not knowing the answers and not being able to produce a polished article is incredibly challenging. So Yvonne, I wanted to just pose that final question to you, and given Adrian is still struggling, you are our nominated across the board football representative now. Not to put any pressure on, don't worry. But I think from your approach with obviously the institutions that you're working with, it would be really interesting to see how do you think kind of football and particularly Project 92 has responded?
Yeah, I think if you take a broader look at sort of community sport, you know, initially there was panic, you know, people, you know, just consumers, can I go to the gym? Can I play my sport? Can I not? Then it became very clear that you can't. Then people go into the mode of, well, what do I do? How do I do it? And there's that anxiety and a bit of despair from everybody. And then as things started to settle, and pretty quickly, you've seen some remarkable sites from community sport, whether that's a local club, whether that's people from a club, really helping neighbours, people that can't get to shops, all that sort of stuff. You know, the professional sports clubs foundations have been doing a phenomenal job. And when I look at Foundation 92, which I chair, we're very much in the infancy of our charity, actually. So I've seen colleagues from other football foundations, you know, have that panic mode and then, right, what can we do? Some staff are working, some staff are furloughed, but you see people delivering food parcels and various things within the community to keep engaging with groups that really do need that level of support on the ground. It's been slightly different for us at Foundation 92 because we weren't out delivering lots of activity yet. We've just recruited ahead of our foundation, so we're really putting the building blocks in place to make sure we can deliver. So I guess this has pushed a lot of that back, but at the same time has enabled us to really think about what is the need post lockdown and where can we perhaps, and any sports really, fill a gap or avoid where there's a lot of public sector support at the moment, but that will inevitably have to reduce because our public sector is facing significant cuts. They're not going to be able to receive all the money that the government have set out, and you know, they're spending way more than the provision is. So how can community sport really take a step forward and fill some of that gap? So that's been really interesting. I think one of the really positive things out of this is the fact that we have been encouraged by the government. You know, physical activity is one of the 4 things we've been able to do. And we've seen, certainly from the data that Sport England have released, quite a steady, it was sort of a drop and then there was a steady increase. But what we have seen is people's recognition of their overall well-being and the fact that, you know, being physically active and getting outdoors is so positive for your mental health. And I hope moving forward, a legacy from this will be that more people who perhaps didn't exercise previously will do. I suppose the final thing is around innovation. You know, I'm sure both John and Kate have seen huge innovations within their sport in terms of what can be done moving forward. And we've seen that of things moving to online, people trying different activities, which is really exciting. But we must accept that there is a potential for this crisis to really widen the inequality gap. Not everybody has access to online, and so we need to be mindful as providers in the future how we deliver activities to everybody, and not simply those that can access. You know, with the release of golf and tennis, great. However, certain portions of the market that would access it.
I completely agree with you, Yvonne, and there's a number of points that you've raised there, which I really want to delve into in the later discussion, particularly about kind of the mental health impact for people, community, and the funding into kind of grassroots. And I think, you know, there is some real positives. And I think actually, you know, it leads me very nicely into my next question, which, and I'm also delighted to say Adrian has managed to guess online. So I'm going to lead my next question into Adrian. What I also forgot to say up front, sorry, I was a little bit thrown that one of my guests hadn't made it on, but for those watching, there is a Q&A bar. We have a lot to cover, but if you feel like you want to actually ask a question direct to one of the panelists or all of the panelists, please feel free to put your question on there. So I'm delighted Adrian has managed to guess online. I'll avoid any jokes about, you know, we are you know, moving forward still as a digital world. But Adrian, I posed the question first off to the other panelists about, you know, what the positives they've seen. And actually I wanted to therefore lead into what I was going to do is my second question, which Yvonne has touched on. I think that what this pandemic has shown us is there is a bit of inequality in terms of who can access sport, whether that's from kind of having the right TV package through to, you know, how much the cost of a ticket to go and watch a sport is. As we start to reopen, and see a new world of actually a lot of professional and spectator sport potentially happening behind closed doors. Do you see this as a positive in terms of A, innovation of how we get people interacting, but B, could this actually be a positive thing in terms of inclusivity, in terms of spectator and professional sport moving forward? There you go, Adrian, a little question to get you going on.
Thank you. Well, first of all, apologies for the delay in arrival. We found our way through it. Yeah, I mean, look, I think coming out of this, whenever that may be, there is obviously an opportunity for increased creativity, and we have to be really conscious of how we make sport as open and inclusive as possible, as we've been trying to do for a long time. But you know, one of my biggest concerns, primarily with football, which is obviously my own background, is that while it's been brilliant to see our stadiums full for 20 odd years now at the top divisions, we've seen, you know, the prices for accessing football increase dramatically over that time, and that's obviously part of, you know, the increased salaries that we've seen. But we've got a huge revenue coming in through broadcast. You know, £9.2 billion over 3 years, I believe it is, for the Premier League. Hopefully, something that can come out of this could be, depending on the the state that football is in when we do hopefully come out of it, would be to see prices certainly lowered for young fans, to encourage them, because they are the lifeblood. I started going to football when it was less than £1 to get in to watch football. You know, and that makes it that you become conditioned. It's part of your habit of life to attend sport. If you lose that habit, and that's obviously proven that if you drop off at some stage, you rarely go back in the same way that you've done previously. So I think we have to really focus on how we ensure that it's accessible to young supporters in particular.
Great, and I'd like to then lead on to that. I mean, John, I know obviously you're in your planning phase of, you know, and having to adapt how your ticketing's working, how the models are working. Sean, all of this in terms of digital accessibility, how you ensure the community's evolved. This is something clearly that was in your roadmap, to borrow a phrase from Mr. Johnson. But is it even more so at front of mind for you now in terms of planning for your tournament?
It absolutely is, Kat. As you said in the introduction, there is a huge desire to see live sport return. As Adrian alluded to, some of that, the behind closed doors element, is born out of need. A lot of sport is predicated on the broadcast contracts that we have. So the world was changing before coronavirus, and I think we've got to not forget that in terms of sports consumption, digital consumption, and accessibility and inclusivity is obviously a really important part. So will people have less disposable income? Will consumer confidence be lower? Will people be making different decisions? We absolutely think so, and we'll listen to a little more insight and a little more research. So everyone's going to have to adapt even more, and that adaptation was beginning anyway. So behind closed doors, it needs to happen, of course, but the experience, the mass social gathering, is so critically important to our tournament. The ability to go with family and friends to share memories, I think, is the very essence of live sport, and that's a huge desire. But it can only be done when it is safe to do so. So there are so many considerations, and as I said in my first answer, a lot of the answers just aren't simply there at the moment.
And handing over to you, Kate, on that then, you know, there is an argument that is it easier for cricket to return because there's less contact as opposed to a sport like football or rugby. But obviously, again, the challenge, particularly as you've tried to introduce some new formats this year, the challenge to therefore play behind closed doors. Do you believe that you can still gain and grow, which obviously is what you're trying to do in terms of the women's game as well? Do you think that will be successful in this sort of new normal of sports behind closed doors?
Yeah, I mean, I think our challenge looks slightly different. I think this year will probably be about keeping the lights on, actually, rather than us trying to view it as a growth opportunity. The profile you would expect, you know, most of us, I think if we remember back to why we fell in love with sports, came as a consequence of enjoying brilliant atmosphere, often going with your parents, starting to engage in school or outside of school. You very much harness that community or familial aspect of sport. Without that, we might find it hard to get the engagement we need to really grow huge audiences. So it is probably about survival and keeping the lights on. Like John, we've identified, some potential trends for us to tap into when the curve does start to improve. And we're very much, we're not trying to be consumed by the now. It's important that we, protect the broader cricket family and the 41 members of the ECB, the recreational and the first class game. But we cannot be complacent about what the future might bring us. So we are looking at things like, is there going to be an interesting growth in women's sport or a further injection into women's sport as we come out the other side of this? I wonder if there's something interesting in volunteering and that beautiful community spirit that we've started to be harnessed, 500,000 NHS volunteers in the space of a week. That kind of desperate need that you talk about for sport could harness itself in a different way in terms of delivery. We rely a lot on volunteers, both stewarding and people attending big tournaments and games, but also critically at grassroots levels with cricket clubs, and people that work with charities and partners of ours like Lord Taverners and Chance to Shine. And volunteers are really important everywhere across the game, and actually it could be a good growth opportunity for us if we can find more people to deliver sport. I've got a few stats if you want me to just run them through them and things that we're thinking about, if it will be helpful. But there's obviously this interesting turn away from team sports in towards solitary activity. We've seen that as a trend and a downward curve in team sports through Sport England's data. Will Corona impact that? Do we need to find a way to allow people to consider team sports or entry into team sports through solitary pursuit? And then this casual element of sport. And we actually drove some data this week that showed that 61% of families are keen to continue exercising with their children as they have done during lockdown. How do we harness that but do it in a casual way for people that want to be active but might not want to don pads and whites and buy kookaburra bats, etc., kookaburra balls and bats, etc., and join a cricket club? That will be really important for us. So a lot for us to think about, a lot for us to consider how we drive things forward, and also for us to look more extensively at the business model. Can we challenge ourselves on cost? Is there a way that we can be leaner as a sport in the future? This has brought a lot of thought and potentially a lot of evolution opportunities as well.
And I think you make some really, really good points. And I think actually some of the data that you pulled out then, I'd love to go to Yvonne on this, around this whole idea of, as you touched on, Yvonne, the positive note is that people seem to be valuing the role that sport is playing for their mental well-being and from a kind of, taking that physical activity. But as Kate said, is there a danger, therefore, that we move to being a bit more solitary, and that then sees a drop in team sports? And I guess what's always been a real bloodlife and driver is the commercial partners that across any sport allow you to kind of connect to communities and allow you to kind of keep that activity going up. So I mean, Yvonne, how do you see that working then in the terms of the future of grassroots and community? Is it evolving, or do we still need that support from the big corporates to help that kind of drive forward?
So I think yes, it's evolving, and we've seen a number of really successful campaigns, whether you look at, This Girl Can or the Undefeatables now, Sport England trying to engage more marginalised groups to try different activities. I think sport traditionally has taken a bit of a battering in terms of, it has to be football, it has to be cricket, it has to be rugby. And whilst those sports have innovated on different kinds, if you think about the 2020, for example, very different flavour to a test match. It's been all of that sort of stuff. People haven't necessarily still found the right activity for them. So we've seen a shift in language in the sector around physical activity in sport and being broader about health and well-being and overall sort of well-being. So I think there's a couple of things, like from a solitary point of view, I think people are trying new things. I've tried yoga, I was saying to you the other day, and I've always wanted to do it, but normally I feel like I need to get 500 calories in my workout, and yoga's not going to do it for me. But I think that is something I'll continue, because it feels like it's being kind to me. So I think people will find different things that they can do. But equally, if people are walking or trying running for the first time or cycling, they're building a confidence about their physical capability. And a lot of the barriers to playing sport is because people are not confident. I couldn't possibly do that. Well, if you become more confident in your own ability to move and to try new things, then you're more likely to think, actually, I might do that family run. So I'm a non-exec director for One Running Movement, and we've moved all of our offering virtual online. So now, picking up on Kate's point, families, it's hugely important. I have 3 children. There's nothing that I can do other than us all going for a game of badminton or something where we can genuinely do it together. There's lots of private sector partners that, you know, maybe offer kids can do this activity and you as a parent can do that, but you kind of want to do stuff together. So I think sports have got a huge opportunity to think about that more informal family activity, you know, rounders and things like that. A great example of how you could all sort of take part in stuff. So I think people doing stuff solitary, yes. I don't think there's enough data yet around the social distancing measures to really consider what team sport looks like for the future. I think we are going to have to think very carefully about how we eventually get people back together and at what age certain things are appropriate, because it's not as easy to keep a group of 5-year-olds apart as it is, you know, maybe 15-year-olds. So I think sport fundamentally will change a lot over the next 12 months. It will have to until a vaccine is found. But with that comes challenges and of course opportunities. And I think for me that's quite exciting, and I've seen a lot of innovation. It's harder for the bigger sports because they've got their membership to consider, they've got clubs to support, they've got, you know, little mini businesses there that will go under, and that will be a travesty in itself. So it's great to see Sport England responding with some of the grants that they have available, but you know that won't be enough. So I suppose on the whole, things are going to change massively. What I would say is that there was huge inequality in sport before COVID-19 came along. And what I think this disease has done is really demonstrate the stark inequalities that existed. The fact that people from lower socioeconomic groups are receiving worse impact from this disease. That was the same before around other kinds of diseases and dependencies. So I hope that we really take a strong look at that as society and not think, oh, this is just COVID, this happened before, and what are we actually going to do about it?
Yeah, I agree, and I think they're very good points. So I think there's what's also is fair to say is the pandemic has really brought to life kind of heroes and villains, so to speak. And I think it's always been really easy to paint professional sports, men or women, athletes, in a negative light. And I think actually, you know, we've seen so many amazing displays of altruism from everyone across sports. I think obviously, you know, being topical, Harry Kane coming out last night with his sponsorship back to his kind of club that gave him his first run out, Leyton Orient. And I think it was a really innovative way of sponsorship. So I wanted to use that as a way to kind of hand back to Adrian on this commercial point. Yes, obviously on the grassroots game, but we are seeing for football, leagues 1, 2, you know, they're in real dire straits here. And could commercial business partners take a leaf out of a Harry Kane book and think about how they can use innovation and different types of sponsorship in a way to keep the game alive?
Well, first of all, Harry Kane's commitment last night was fantastic, and yeah, I'm sure that could lead to a number of other potential sponsorship and partnership opportunities the further down the pyramid that you go. The point you made there, Kat, and I think it's not always discussed as much as when we talk about the Premier League. The further down the football chain we move, those clubs in League 1, League 2, and then below that, you know, semi-professional clubs in the National League, if they don't get footfall through their stadiums over the next year, you know, it's catastrophic for them. And football as an industry is going to have to find a way to come together to collectively maybe self-fund them, or some of those clubs will not be around in a year's time. That's the harsh reality of it. It's a multi-billion pounds industry, but it has huge expenses at the moment. And so the money that comes in does go out. And once you go outside of the Premier League, you're into the Championship, where the wages to turnover ratio is just ridiculously high. And that's why they're discussing at the moment things like wage caps, because they cannot carry on with individual owners subsidising the football clubs to the way they do when they've got no crowds going in for games. They've got no use of their corporate and hospitality facilities, which are used throughout the week now. And if they get the season up and running behind closed doors, yes, it will help to some degree outside of the Premier League if it's the Championship. But beyond this season, another year of that, there's got to be a new structure, a new model for that. And it's fantastic to see individuals who are obviously wealthy individuals like Harry Kane, contributing to society. And I think football has been incredible during this period. We've seen Chelsea today talking about their contribution with the food parcels that they've been involved in, but there's stories up and down the UK. David Moyes delivering fruit and veg, every club with its community foundation. There's so many good stories, but that in the end, ultimately, that's not going to be enough to protect the football pyramid as we know it. And we've got clubs in our communities up and down the country that are absolutely at the hub and central to the towns, and they play such a crucial role to the well-being of those communities, often unseen, but they give people a purpose on a weekend. They look forward to it, and as an industry, we have to do all we can to try and protect the longevity of those clubs because of what they play within our social fabric.
And I think, obviously you missed my wonderful introduction, Adrian, being late, no, I'm joking. But, that for me is that loss in people's lives, whether that's playing, supporting, it is really critical. And I think, I'd like to hand to John on this point around, I think for rugby league as well, you've talked about the World Cup being really that watershed moment, but across the North, rugby league and the clubs and the community. So how are you going to address that in terms of making sure that, commercial partners aren't kind of put off or worried that they're not going to see the return in terms of investing in still keeping that kind of lifeblood alive?
Yeah, I think the first point to say professional sports clubs have a huge part to play in the communities. A lot of our focus has been on community sport, community rugby league. If we think this is obviously a crisis that has affected us all, but we've got to not just look at the short-term fix, we've got to look at the long-term, and the pipeline of talent, professional athletes, will come from community clubs. So very much our plan, right from the start, has been built around making a positive impact on people's lives. We exist for 5 weeks. Sports events are incredibly inefficient, so we've got to make sure that we demonstrate something that transcends tournaments and transcends rugby league, and that has been around our legacy programme, Inspiration All, about how we engage with local communities, people that might not be interested in rugby league per se, or particularly interested in what we're doing, but how can we make a positive difference, and whether that's fitness programme, work around loneliness, dementia, volunteering, as Kate said earlier, to use the vehicle of the tournament to actually make a difference. And when we talk about legacy, and it's too frequently used a word, particularly from events, legacy is a here and now. It's what we're going to do now, it's what we're going to do during the tournament, and then it's for the sport to pick up thereafter, and it goes right back to sports clubs, both the community game and professionally, being at the heart of the community. And when we think of our tournament in the north of England, it will be about civic pride. It will be about celebrating some fantastic places, about the people there, and then hopefully bringing together the nation. And certainly in 500 days' time, the world will hopefully look a different place, and we'll be able to celebrate that together. But the impact that sport can play is just incredible, from simple things like rhythm and structure in people's lives through to some more transformative impacts.
So there's been a lot of talk, I guess, over the last 24 hours, particularly on the, and I think, Boris Johnson himself has been pretty open that obesity has been a national crisis for a while. And actually what we're seeing is people obviously who are suffering more when they have contracted the disease, that, obesity remains kind of our sort of national problem. And again, if you were a smart kind of sport or businessman, I know that this is something we've all been like pushing for a long time. But do you think, again, in terms of the purpose initiatives and focus on kind of that real key activeness, that this will just, again, accelerate? You know, I've talked to a lot of different industries on these webinars, and it feels like there's a lot of stuff that was going to happen. It's just been put on kind of, you know, acceleration because of this crisis. So again, I'm going around in my circle here, but Kate, back to you in terms of, you know, do you think that this will be a real force for you in terms of the cricket world to really kind of maybe be a bit more direct and pointed, and sort of how you can help overcome some of those issues facing us as a nation?
Yeah, I think one thing is clear is that it's going to be about the collective moving forward, really, and actually to tackle, sorry, too many T's there, to tackle the obesity problem in a meaningful way. I think it's going to have to happen at both the activation and probably the government level. You know, do we believe that sport is accessible enough? You know, my first contact points with sport, and I'm an active person and kept it up in my adult life, came through school. You know, is it time that actually we do look back to revise the amount of sports that's delivered in schools? Part of our long-term strategy is certainly to go back and look at how much cricket is played in schools, and I'm certain that's been part of the problem of our decline in the years that kind of come before now. Cricket, I think, was relatively low down the list, 7th or even 8th, behind dodgeball, I think, at one point, quite awkwardly. But cricket takes a little bit of time. We need probably, you know, is it that quicker, faster, easier sports have been chosen to deliver? You know, we've always asked that it should really be mandated for an hour a day of activity in school. I think that's going to be a way forward when we can support that, just the same as John's sport, same as football, can deliver that kind of ambition. That will help us all, but I think it needs to be about the collective. I mean, one thing that I've been concerned about is the impact on BAME communities, and I know that's been heavily discussed in the media, but you know, whether there is a physiological vulnerability from people from BAME, you know, people from BAME communities, or whether it is that they are serving on the front line. But we know that they are hard to reach audiences times to be active. Cricket's got great reach. You know, 30% of our active participation base are British South Asian audiences. I think we'd love the opportunity to improve urban facilities where some of those problems can emerge and where high areas of deprivation can also be. That's all going to happen. Infrastructure, you know, government guidance, sport activation, that's all going to come as a cohesive plan. I know we're really keen to see that happen anyway. I'm sure John and everyone would echo, and Jennifer.
I think that you make a really good point here, and that is actually a theme I wanted to touch on, was collaboration, because it feels like, you know, sport can often be seen as tribal, dependent on which team you support, which sport you follow. But it feels we're being, again, I know that bodies like UK Sport, as many of you have touched on, and also within your sports, there's been a huge amount of collaboration, be that within players' associations, whatever it might be. But again, does this feel like that real moment to kind of grasp and kind of almost put away the I'm football, I'm cricket, and actually, as Kate said, this is about really, you know, giving inspiration and kind of from a more sort of fundamental level, upping the activeness of our next generation. Yvonne, I wanted to come to you actually, because I think Salford's had a bit of a bad rap over the last couple of days in terms of the kind of levels that were being reported. I know the Sun had a little bit of a pop at saying it was one of the most infected places in the UK. But do you believe in this kind of spirit of cross-sport collaboration and the learnings that we can all take from what others are experiencing and how we can be stronger together?
Yeah, like 100%. And I would say in respect of Salford has some of the poorest health indices in the country. So is it any wonder that there's a higher level of COVID cases? Of course not. If we look at the data, it's following those indices. So, you know, we have to remember there's humans at the end of this, and nobody's going out there, I don't think, intentionally to contract the disease, and certainly wants to be suffering as a result of it. But people will report what they report, and so be it. I am and have always been a firm believer in collaboration. I think the unique opportunity here is twofold, really. One is around sports, learning, collaborating, working together. The other is about sport, working with wider services. So we look at Greater Manchester and the devolution agenda of health and social care here, championed by Andy Burnham. And, you know, there's opportunities. It's about integrated support for people at a local level. And I think Greater Manchester's, you know, trailblazing in terms of what it's achieved thus far, and will continue. If we look at, you know, our past as an example, I know that John and his team at the Rugby League World Cup have been looking at how to support young people in terms of travel and incentives to be able to access sporting opportunities they wouldn't have had before. So I think Greater Manchester wise, there is absolutely a tradition of working together. I think what this does is accelerate that, and it puts it on like an even higher plane, if you like, because no sport is going to be the same after this for a very long time. And actually, we should challenge ourselves as to say, was the normal right anyway? And is this an opportunity to almost wipe that slate clean and really look at the difference we can make and really challenge ourselves, both from a commercial point of view, but also from an inclusivity point of view. I think if we look at local facilities, and most people are going to be accessing a swimming pool or a leisure centre nearby as an example, and obviously there are other things that people can do, but as people return back to some form of activity, there's going to be less numbers allowed, and we've got local facilities who are already operating on trying to break even budget. You know, we're going to have some massive challenges. So if there are bigger facilities owned by you know, the likes of the ECB or professional sports clubs, how might they open their doors to the community to provide activities that maybe weren't there before? How can we take some activities online and engage different audiences? You know, if we look at the seriousness in care homes, you know, again, we need people not to be sedentary. We need people to be moving. So, you know, if, you know, cricket does have quite an ageing sort of population in terms of its fan base, and many people who may have played cricket in the past could be in care homes. You know, is there something that cricket could do to engage with people in those sorts of environments, like we've seen other kind of activities in sports? So I think there is an opportunity for collaboration, but I think sport needs to be very careful about how it positions itself in that wider arena. Sport is not the solution for everything. It plays an absolutely valuable part in terms of social benefit and individual feeling and resilience, and teaching amazing things as well as the physical well-being. But we have to be really careful we don't go in with our kind of chargers and say we're going to solve the world's problems, because we won't. But we can work together, and there is a willingness, and it does happen already. I'm sure John and Kate will tell you, and Adrian, you know, there are groups of CEOs and performance directors that meet to discuss. Maybe it just changes the conversation a little bit.
Yeah, and I think you're really right on that level. I mean, Adrian, on a really practical level for football, you're going to be taking a long, hard look at the Bundesliga on its return tonight, this weekend, and see, guess what practical level lessons can be learnt and leveraged as we see the return to professional sport.
Yeah, it's a really good test example this weekend that I'm sure that everybody in the Premier League and the EFL are watching very closely, both insofar as how they manage the whole medical protocols, which we've already seen a few challenges there in Germany this week, including one manager who's not even going to be with his team tomorrow because he broke protocol by visiting a shop himself. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see how that works for them, but also the innovation. I think it's Mönchengladbach that have, you know, they've given their fans the opportunity to put their faces on whatever cutouts they're using in the stadium to create a bit of a different type of atmosphere. And I think this leads us forward to the innovation piece that you talked about. I agree with everything that's been said, by the way, there about, you know, working collaboratively, and there is already a great deal of work that does go on collaboratively, as been said, and it has done for quite some time. But that's just going to be, the emphasis of that's going to be increased even more moving forward. But the innovation piece, I think it does provide a real good opportunity for us, and not just for the people who are in the senior leadership positions. I think it's, using whatever resources that you have within your own organisations, but also partner organisations or community elements of your organisations that you can reach to, young and old people who can bring all elements of creative thinking to the table that can make us do things that we've not done before. And then beyond that, looking at what other sports do, and we often look to the American sports for how they provide their access to content they use, and they've obviously been great trailblazers with content, with the documentaries that they've previously put together, the access to dressing rooms for interviews. And there's going to have to be a lot more creativity if we're playing a lot of sport in the short term in closed stadium arenas. So there's challenges undoubtedly, and I agree sport's never going to be the same again, well, certainly for a long time forward. It's an opportunity to reset where we are, but it's also a great opportunity to be a lot more creative moving forward, working collaboratively.
I completely agree on the kind of creative and access point. And I think also, you know, the appetite for sport has not gone away. You've seen the figures on Netflix of like, I'm going to get it wrong now, The Last Dance, I think, has been the Georgian documentary that's been on, has like been hitting kind of every level. As most of you know, I think I probably bored definitely Kate silly about my passion for tennis in the past, but you know, it's been amazing to see kind of Insta lives between people like Djokovic and Murray. You know, you'd never have got that kind of access. And I think, again, like with everybody, it's felt this sort of levelling up. You know, everyone's stuck at home, everyone's trying to reach out. So, John, in terms of for you, in terms of, you know, you've got, I guess, as I said, the challenging task, but in some ways you're going to be able to take lessons and learnings from everyone who's having to restart that bit sooner from before you put your tournament on. So innovation, creativity, digital, all stuff in your blueprint right now?
Yeah, all of that and a little bit more. I mean, as everyone said, the desire to share and knowledge transfer, I think that's greater than it ever has been. I think there is a sense we are all in this together. No one has the answers, so the collaboration amongst governing bodies is incredibly strong. But yeah, I mean, the point of difference, it's interesting, isn't it, that some of the content has been really creative. We've seen rich delve into archive, which a lot of people have used, and I think that's been a really great thing. So it's just working through and looking at the here and now, getting sport back, and then in the long term getting sport back to something like what we have all enjoyed. I mean, that magical moment in the Men's Cricket World Cup final, pure unscripted drama. No Hollywood scriptwriter could have written that, and that's why we love sport. That's why we have that urge to know we don't know the outcome, and we certainly are full of hope for our teams, and we just hope that we can provide a small element of that in the future.
I agree. I mean, I totally agree with you. It's been amazing, the archive, although, you know, I'll be glad when my Saturdays are not focused on watching a Euro, whatever, rerun of England, Colombia. Well, that wasn't Euros, but you get what I'm getting at. So, look, I wanted to finish on a question we've kind of posed to all of our guests that we've had on these webinars, which, you know, we're obviously hosting this webinar with Pro Manchester. Greater Manchester as a region is, you know, synonymous with, you know, amazing sporting feats. We've got brilliant clubs across those sport. We've had famous victories. We've got a fantastic stadium, and I know, John, you're going to be holding the women's and men's final at Old Trafford next autumn. In terms of the region and, you know, why it can be, what we've felt on these webinars is there's a real positivity. I think Yvonne's touched on, you know, we have a strong leader in Andy Burnham. Sport and health has always been very, very high up his agenda in terms of making sure that happens. But, you know, in terms of giving people a bit of hope and joy around kind of the region getting back to sport, what do you see as the kind of positives for Greater Manchester and the region getting back to sport and getting back to that kind of normal, kind of potentially quicker than other parts of the country? Kate, I'm going to come to you first, even though I know you're not in the region, but obviously cricket and the Lancashire County Cricket Club and the stadium we have up here, big focus area for you.
I'm on mute, sorry. Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, hopefully we launched a Greater Lancashire sort of cricket action plan. Can everyone hear me? I've got a note to say I'm muted. Sorry, thank you. Well, we launched an action plan which will bring 2 urban cricket centres to the area, in the next year or so. The plans are still to kind of complete and deliver those, which I think will be brilliant for participation. And as we talked about, getting into British South Asian audiences, which we know the wider region has lots of communities, and that will be really important to us. As you said, it's a culturally diverse, amazing area of the UK. Sport's enormous. I don't think it would be hard for us to harness great audiences. The aim was to have one of the 100 teams. You alluded to it earlier. We've had to put that off a year because it was really not achievable starting behind closed doors. But we'll look to building that again, very much a sort of blurring of entertainment and sport, you know, moving away from some of the more traditional cricket, of which we've seen, you know, fantastic scenes in Manchester. So we'll look forward to building all of that, harnessing that new, ripping up the rule book a little bit around what we already know, and trying to learn and be agile as we go. John used that word earlier about being agile, and I think that there'll be a need for that more than ever. But I'm a Brighton girl, but we're very familiar with the Lancashire region, just because their passion for sport and because cricket's so inherent all across the north and so popular. So for us, it'll be a pleasure to get it back on and start seeing everyone engaging in it, and hopefully it's not that far away now.
So, I mean, Yvonne, obviously you've got 92 in your title. So clearly, you know, Mr. Neville is your boss. So clearly, you know, I know that you're very keen to get sport back going. But I mean, for you, you know, you must be, for the region, desperate to kind of really get that back on and see that kind of participation and excitement, as Kate said.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think sport is in the fabric of Greater Manchester. We see from the legacy from the Commonwealth Games is still alive. You know, that doesn't happen in many other places, I'm not going to lie. You know, people learn from Manchester and what it achieved. So it's in the DNA. I think we're also, in Greater Manchester, we're a really resilient bunch. We see it time and time again with adversity. The city region comes together, really supports each other. I think we've got very strong leaders, you know, public, private, voluntary sector, and actually we tend to own things here. We don't wait for it to be done to us. Greater Manchester will kind of take a lead, and we've seen it already with people saying, you know, this is how we're going to do things here. And I think we do things differently as a result of that, but it's very positive. So when you've got fantastic minds, and you've got strong leadership, and you've got a will and a belief that we can and we will, so kind of watch us. That's what this city region is all about to me. I mean, with my day job hat on, you know, yeah, I have an incredible boss who's an inspirational leader, and immediately when this crisis kind of hit, opened up his hotels to the NHS, and you know, it makes you proud to work with people like that, and you will always go kind of above and beyond. We work with Lancashire Cricket Club through UA92. They're a fantastic partner. You know, so and I've spent a lot of time over at the cricket. Knew the chairman there very well. Sadly, lost his life a few weeks back now. So, you know, there's so much we can do here, and there's a real passion. So I have no doubt sport will become bigger and better, and it will thrive. It might just look a little bit different for a little while, or maybe for the long term. But with such exciting events like the World Cup's going to have a great presence here. There's so many things to look forward to. So yeah, Greater Manchester, I mean, people call us a bit bolshy and bold, but you know, I'm a proud Manc, and I won't apologise for that.
Well, I think you paraphrased Tony Wilson in It's Manchester, we do things differently here very well. One thing that maybe the Manchester sporting community is hoping that maybe if the Premier League didn't get restarted, I shouldn't say this, but obviously Liverpool primed to lift the trophy. But Adrian, from a kind of professional Premier League perspective, you know, big clubs, big personalities in the region. So again, sure, you know, you can see that there's going to be the appetite for the region to get back to sport.
Yeah, I mean, look, I just got to echo the sentiments there that have been said to me by Yvonne. I mean, I'm not from Manchester. I've got no direct allegiance to the area, but it's a fantastic sporting environment across all different sports. Obviously, people immediately look at Manchester United and Manchester City from a Manchester point of view, from the football side of things, but right across so many sports. It's provided so many great athletes as well that have performed, you know, in different disciplines, and the passion there is there for all to see. Look, football hopefully will come back, and will come back soon in a safe environment, hopefully behind closed doors. And then at some point with crowds again, however that comes about. But as a region, as a city, Manchester is just a great hotbed, melting pot of sport, and it's something it's always exciting to go to Manchester to watch sport, even when you're not from the area.
And last word to you, John, as obviously, you know, the Manchester region and across the whole of the North, incredibly important for you as you roll out your plans. So I know you're keen to obviously get going on engaging those fans and potential ticket buyers as well in the near future.
Very much so. I'm proud to say I both live and work in Greater Manchester. Greater Manchester and the North of England will play a huge part in our tournament. And I guess back to what I said earlier, civic pride, I think that ability for people to celebrate where they're from and to get together. And I think Greater Manchester and the North will certainly do our tournament proud. Great.
Well, you know, it's been a really insightful conversation. I think we've covered a lot of ground. There's obviously, you know, I know would probably delved into some of those topics in a lot more detail over a longer time, but I think that, you know, what I felt is that it has been a testing time, whatever sport you're in and involved in. But I think that we can see some positivity around that spirit of collaboration. And as all of you have touched on, I think, you know, some of the things that maybe weren't right, using this as a positive platform to change how we change accessibility, change digital inclusion, change the participation. But I think, you know, hopefully we'll all be watching some live sports soon. And I wanted to say thank you first off to the panel for all giving up your time. As you can all imagine, incredibly busy people, given the challenging world we're all operating in. And thank you to everybody for tuning in. I hope it's been another really valuable knowledge exchange. And yeah, have a great weekend and stay alert, I think is the new terminology. So thank you very much. Take care.